Hello, and welcome to the first in a series of videos where I'm going to go over some key skills to do with creative writing and also sort of reading. And what we're going to do is we're just going to quickly start by looking at the assessment objectives for GCSE English, just so you know what we're going to be covering. I'm going to explain those to you now. Okay. Okay. So what we're going to be covering in these videos is AO5 and AO6 mostly, but hopefully we'll also be able to cover some of AO2 as well. So assessment objective 5 is about communicating clearly, effectively, and imaginatively. So this ties in with creative writing, which is a big part of paper 1. It also is a big part of paper 2, but paper 2 is non-fiction, and paper 1, which we're preparing for now, is fiction. So we are focusing on writing fiction, so writing stories, that sort of thing. And what sort of links all in here really is, so we're looking at imaginatively. So we're going to be thinking about how we sort of describe things in these videos. We're going to be thinking about how we might introduce characters, how we might sort of set the scene for the reader basically, and how to make your writing really engaging and descriptive and full of wonderful language. And we're also going to be looking at structure as well. So how stories are structured and how you can sort of build that into your work. We're going to also be looking at developing things like vocabulary here as well, and just thinking about using those sort of different ways of structuring your text, describing things, everything linked to creative writing basically. And as I said, some videos I'd also like to think about how other writers might use language. So we'll start really by sort of developing our own writing skills, and then we're going to start to think about how other writers might use these similar writing skills to have an effect on the reader. So you just, yeah, so if you make sure that you have got the sort of first task open now, so that's the first the first creative writing task, looking at describing things. Okay, so I'm going to start today, and what I'm going to be describing today as I talk you through it is this, which is a old pocket watch I found in a bunch of stuff in storage. And fix it up there, you open it up, pretty standard really. I'm just going to share my screen so you can see what I'm doing here. So yeah, basically what we're going to do is we're going to look at sort of developing that ability to describe. Now, we get our information as human beings, we get our information from our senses. So there are 5 senses, broadly speaking. I know there's a 6th sense, stuff with balance and stuff like that, but for the purposes of this, we're focusing on those 5 senses. So sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. Now, people obviously are very visual usually, so most description tends to focus on what can be seen. Okay. However, a really good trick here is also to make sure you engage the other senses as we're talking about. So if you'd like, pause the video now and just find something, a bit like my pocket watch here, just something you can hold in your hand, something you can pick up, something you can describe. And I'd just like you to write, after you've paused the video, I'd just like you to write a few sentences describing it. Okay, so resuming the video here. So this is what I've put here about the dimensions and shape of this thing. So I've said it's about the size of a coin, and it's quite thick compared to a coin. It's got a chain. You've got a lid attached to it by a hinge. You've got decorative holes in the lid. You press the button, it opens. So that's part of what I can see. If I just sort of look at this, I can see that. I can see the chain, I can see the lid, I can see the little decorative holes in the lid, etc. If I go on to think about color and texture as well, so starting to think about bringing more description into this, what we can see, I might also say it's made of a sort of smooth silvery metal. The face is a sort of off-white ivory color, and the numbers are picked out in black, same as the hands, and it's a little bit scratched here. It's been in storage a while, as you can see here, I think you can make that out. And there's little bits of tarnish around the side where I think the sort of surface metal is wearing off a bit, really. So have a look back through what you described there, what word you used to describe it, and have a bit of a think whether you could maybe expand that a bit more. And just thinking about all those dimensions, think about the color, think about the texture, and everything to do with that. Okay, so what I want to do now really is carry on and talk about engaging all of the senses. Because while, yes, we are very visual, it tends to be the first thing we notice is what something looks like, we do have other senses. Now, getting a little bit into the psychology of reading, the psychology of writing. Readers are engaged. Readers want to read on, they want to read your stuff when you are putting them there in the picture, when you are giving them visual information, auditory, so hearing information, smell and stuff like that. Smell in particular is a very powerful sense. And without getting too much into the psychology, it's got something to do with the way that the brain works and the brain processes smells. I'm sure we've all had that experience where we'll just get a waft of the smell and it sort of takes you back to childhood. For me, there's a certain brand of cigarette, and if someone's smoking that, it reminds me of my granddad. So smell is a really powerful one, actually. So it's always a good one to use. So yeah, pause the video, and I'd like you to just quickly go through and whatever object you've picked, just see if you can identify those other senses as well, other than sight. So smell, taste, only if appropriate, obviously. You know, you don't necessarily, you know, I'm not going to be licking this to see what it tastes like, for instance. So smell, taste, touch, sound. Okay. Excellent. So this is what I've sort of put here. So sound, well, you can hear the chain rattling a little bit as you move it. You won't be able to pick it up, but if I hold it to my ear, I can hear a faint ticking sound. Touch, if I've been holding it a while, obviously because it's metal, it's warm. If I just pick it up off the surface, it's cold. It's smooth as well. And I don't know what metal they've used to make it out of, but it feels heavier in my hands than I'd expect. Okay? As for smell, smells a bit of rust and a bit of that sort of strange copper smell you get from old coins, you know, back when they used to make them out of more copper. And taste, obviously, as I said, I'm not going to lick this. So, you know, obviously, if you picked an ice cream or something like that, by all means, describe the taste. I'm not describing the taste of this. So have a look back through what you did, and just have a little bit of a think about that. And then we'll move on to the next section. Okay, so what I want to look at next, really, now we've got all that beautiful description and, you know, we've sort of picked out what this thing, whatever you've got in front of you, might look like, might smell like, maybe taste like, depending, you know, what it might sound like, the sound it might make, etc., etc., etc. We're going to look at building some what's known as figurative language. So these are metaphors and similes, and no doubt you've had a bit of a look at these at school, but it's probably been a while. So I just want to do a quick recap. So figurative language, and there are other types of figurative language, but we're just focusing on metaphor and simile today. It works by comparing something real in whatever you're writing to something not real. And it does that to sort of illustrate something, okay? And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. Now, a simile is the one that makes a comparison, whereas a metaphor simply says something is something not real. So go back to my watch example. If I picked, for instance, I don't know, shiny silver, okay? So the color is shiny silver, okay? Now, the real thing here is the watch and the fact it's made out of shiny silver. Now, what I compare it to is important here because depending on what I can compare it to, I can change the atmosphere, I can change the overall feeling of what I'm describing. So I'm going to compare this I'm going to start by making a simile here. Shiny silver, like the scales of a fish. Okay. A metaphor. Shiny silver fish scales. So a simile contains that description, that comparative phrase, like the, or as if, or just as. Whereas a metaphor just says shiny silver, fish scales. You know, says it is what it is. And your reader will be able to tell from context that you're not literally talking about fish scales here, you're using a metaphor. Because the rest of your text is going to be describing whatever you're describing. Okay. Now, the cool thing you can do with metaphors and similes is you can sort of add some extra words in here, and you can change the atmosphere of what you're writing, and that's incredibly useful. So if you can see here, just on the right, so just by changing some of those words around, just by sort of bulking out those similes I'm making, comparing the color of this watch to fish scales, I've created quite a sinister simile here. So if I wanted to create a sinister atmosphere, I might say shiny silver like the dim light reflected off the scales of a deep sea fish. But if I wanted to sort of create a really light, brilliant atmosphere, I might say something like this. I might say shiny silver, as if the midday sun had caught the scales of some beautiful tropical fish. And both of those similes, even though they are both comparing the same real thing, the same imaginary thing, fish scale, they create a very different atmosphere. So do bear that in mind. What kind, when you use these similes, when you use these metaphors, what do you want your reader to feel? What do you want them to take away from this? Do you want to give them the clue that this pocket watch, for instance, I don't know, is cursed, maybe, maybe it belongs to a long dead pirate? Or do you want to sort of give them the idea that maybe it's magical, maybe it opens a doorway to some fantastic realm? In which case, use the sort of brilliant, awe-inspiring one, okay? And it's just about sort of modifying that word choice, thinking about the other words you're going to use in that simile to get across this message. Okay, so I've enlarged the table on the worksheet just so you can see it a bit clearer on the video screen here. Right, so what I did was I went back and identified some of the core things that I sort of described in terms of this watch. So I picked my favorite, basically. And this is how we make a semantic field. So we have a column on the left here, where we're talking about what there is, so what's in front of us, and then a column on the right where we're thinking about what we compare it to. So again, smooth, silvery metal, we've already done this one. I compared it like the scales of a fish. Faint ticking sound, I put here like a tap, tap, tap on a window pane. Large coin and quite thick, and I'm going to say here, we compare it to a silver coin from a pirate board. Heavy, you'd think, and I put here as if it were weighed down by the hours it counted. So again, I'm finding my real thing here. So it really is smooth, silvery metal. And I'm comparing it to something figurative, something not real, like the scales of a fish. Lid has decorative holes, and I put here like a window to the watch face below. So I'm comparing the decorative holes here to a window. Okay, so what I would like you to do now, we're approaching the end of the video here. What I'd like you to do as your final task is I would like you to open up your worksheet, although obviously you've probably already got it open. And yeah, I would like you to find an object and follow this method and just write a descriptive piece on it. So if you've been following step by step, you've already done a lot of the hard work here. If you're watching the video first and then you're going to go away and do it, obviously you've got more to do. So yeah, what we're doing is pick an object, and just as I did, start by thinking about what it looks like, then move on to thinking about all the different senses, and then finally pick your favorites and think about what you can compare it to, and just build up a nice little semantic field here, some nice similes and metaphors you can use to describe this, for just a couple of paragraphs to describe what you've got. Okay, so there we go. That's the end of the first video.